Naval Amphibious Base Coronado always smelled of salt and gun oil at dawn. A blade-thin wind came off the Pacific, slicing through the long concrete parade ground, where 200 candidates for BV/S-Class 418 stood at attention. No one spoke. Hell Week waited just beyond the calendar's edge, and each man, or woman, braced for it like a punch they could already taste. The chief petty officer at the podium read names in a bored monotone. One by one, the recruits jogged forward, accepted a blue ball cap stitched with SEAL candidate, signed a waiver that said the Navy could break their bodies without liability, then filed back into formation. Routine, ritual, reassuring. Until he called Blake Jordan, she stepped from the rear rank. 34, taller than most, hair shorn to regulation, face composed into the blankness veterans wear to keep strangers out. She was the only woman on the roster. The fact hung in the air like a bright flag no one admitted seeing. Men's eyes tracked her, some curious, some amused, some weighing and discarding her in the same heartbeat. Jordan kept her gaze on the podium, boots ticking across the tarmac. Behind her, a hiss of whispers rippled seriously. Thought they stopped this experiment. She didn't slow. But as she reached the narrow lane that funneled candidates past the folding table, the boot of the man beside it slid 3 inches into her path. Later, she would replay the details, the careless angle of his ankle, the micro smile. But in the moment, there was only impact. Her toe caught leather, momentum hurled her forward, knee met chilled concrete with a slap. The fresh cap skittered off, clipboard and pen clattered. The parade ground's breathing fell perfectly still. A single snort of laughter escaped the formation. Another answered. Laughter breathes like fire on dry brush. Within seconds, it licked around her. The candidate who tripped her, Monroe's name tape crisply ironed, murmured, "Oops." Soft enough for plausible deniability, loud enough for her alone. Jordan exhaled once. Pain stung through her patella and up her thigh, but she made no sound as she gathered the clipboard. Her blouse shifted. A dull silver dog tag glinted against the green undershirt. Lexi Torres. The only jewelry she owned. Someone saw it. She felt the flick of their attention. She tucked the tag back, gripped the cap, rose. Senior Chief Carter stalked forward, boots thundering. He didn't offer a hand. Instead, he surveyed the silent semicircle of men, let contempt sharpen his voice. "This isn't recess for code teamwork, Princess," he barked. "This ground selects who lives through gunfire. Age and a birth certificate don't guarantee a damn thing." Chuckles answered him, a firm, half hidden in a sleeve recorded. Jordan's eyes met his for the space of a heartbeat. Something in them, a rifleman's steadiness, an old grief, made Carter's skull flicker. But the moment passed. He jerked his chin. "Move." She did, limping only until the eyes at her back lost interest. In the rear rank, she resumed parade rest. No one whispered now. Instead, they edged centimeters away, as if incompetence were contagious. She squeezed the brim of the ball cap until plastic creaked. Marked, she thought. Not by blood or rank, but by the knowledge every man here had just weighed her and found her breakable. Her mother's voice drifted up from memory, clinical and unsentimental. "When they dismiss you, say nothing. Let your work correct their eyesight." Work would come soon enough. The name reading droned on. Overhead, gulls wheeled, screaming for fish. Jordan's knee throbbed, but she held still, counting her breaths the way she had in Overwatch positions, slow and slower out, pain compartmentalized behind steel doors. This, she reminded herself, was page 1 of a long ledger. Combat had never been about what happened to you, only about what you did next. When the final candidate received his cap, the chief dismissed the formation. Men dispersed toward chow or barracks, talk exploding now that discipline's lid lifted. Jordan turned, intending to find ice for her knee. Monroe materialized, swagger casual. "You okay there, Blake?" he asked, friendly as a snake testing warmth. "Concrete's a hell of a teacher." She looked at him, expression unreadable. Lesson taken. Monroe opened his mouth for another jab, but Senior Chief Carter's shout summoned him. He jogged off, and Jordan headed the opposite way, gait steady, every step a declaration no one else could hear. At the edge of the grinder she paused, letting the sea wind whip through her short hair. The Pacific smelled of rust and cold salt, identical to the night air outside Kandahar. She could almost taste dust in her mouth, hear Lexi whisper, "Don't flinch," just before the rifles cracked. They thought they had shoved down an unqualified statistic. They had, in fact, challenged a sniper instructor who had survived 2 tours and the bureaucratic exile that followed her best friend's death. Jordan wasn't here to prove women could keep up. She was here because a door remained unzipped from its hinges, and she knew how to breach it. Cap in hand, she pivoted toward medical to disinfect the scrape, her back straight as a ruler. The first battle was already recorded, not the stumble or the chief's ridicule, but the fact she had risen without letting them glimpse the hurt. War, she knew, is a stack of such pages. She had filled many. She would fill many more. And the men who laughed. They would learn, sooner or later, that some targets are easiest to hit right before they fire back. The medical corpsman handed Jordan an ice pack without looking up from his paperwork. "Scraped knee," he muttered, checking a box. "Take 2 ibuprofen, drink water. Don't be a hero." She pressed the cold gel against her swelling kneecap and studied the duty roster pinned to the wall. Tomorrow, 500 PT formation, followed by combat conditioning. Basic stuff. Nothing she hadn't done 1,000 times in places where failure meant more than a failed grade. "Blake." Senior Chief Carter's voice boomed through the medical bay's thin walls. "Get your ass to supply. You're missing half your gear." Jordan limped across the compound to a warehouse that smelled of rubber and industrial detergent. Behind a chain-link cage, a bored petty officer named Wilson processed equipment requests with the enthusiasm of a DMV clerk. "Name?" he asked without looking up. "Blake Jordan. Class 418. Wilson's fingers paused over his keyboard. A smirk tugged at his mouth. "Oh yeah, the YouTube star. Saw the clip already." He turned his monitor so she could see 30 seconds of shaky phone footage, showing her stumble, the laughter, the chief's verbal lashing. The title read "SEAL Candidate Faceplants on Day 1. "Funny thing," Wilson continued, pulling items from shelves with deliberate slowness. "Looks like we're short on size small gear. Might take a few days to get your stuff in." He slid a requisition form across the counter. Jordan scanned the inventory. Boots, men's size 9, 2 sizes too large. Uniform blouses, medium, when she wore small. Dive fins, also oversized. "These won't fit," she said evenly. Wilson shrugged. "Budget cuts. Make do with what we got." Jordan signed the form without argument. She understood the game, small humiliations designed to make her quit before real training began. But as she gathered the ill-fitting gear, Wilson's radio crackled to life. "Supply, this is admin. We need Blake's service jacket pulled for review. Commander's orders." Wilson's smirk faded. He glanced at Jordan with something that might have been curiosity, then reached for his phone. "Yeah, I'll have it ready in 10. Walking back to the barracks in boots that rubbed her heels raw, Jordan felt eyes tracking her progress. Candidates stood in small clusters, their conversations dying as she passed. She caught fragments of whispers. Heard she was some kind of logistics specialist. Probably knows how to count bullets real good. Give her a week before she rings the bell. The bell. A brass ship's bell mounted outside the training office, its rope worn smooth by the hands of hundreds of quitters. Ring it 3 times, and your BD/S nightmare ended. Your name got added to the growing list of those who didn't want it bad enough. In her small barracks room, Jordan arranged her oversized gear with military precision. She laced the two big boots tight enough to prevent her feet from sliding, rolled extra socks into the toe areas, adjusted the uniform blouse with safety pins hidden beneath the fabric. Her roommate, a former college football player named Rodriguez, watched from his rack. "Why don't you just complain to someone?" he asked. "That supply guy's obviously screwing with you." Jordan tested the modified boot fit, took a few steps. "Complaints are just confessions that you can't solve problems." Rodriguez nodded slowly. He'd grown up poor in East La. He understood the mathematics of keeping your head down. At evening chow, Jordan sat alone while conversations swirled around her. The cafeteria's acoustics carried voices clearly. That she doesn't make it past the first timed run. Probably wash out during surf torture. What's the point? They're just going to lower standards anyway. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Across the room, Monroe held court at a table of candidates, regaling them with embellished versions of the morning's incident. His gestures grew more dramatic with each retelling. After chow, Jordan returned to her room and opened a small notebook, the same one she'd carried through 2 deployments in Afghanistan. She turned to a fresh page and wrote in precise handwriting. Day 1. Standard hazing protocol. Supply sabotage, social isolation, public humiliation. Expected behavior. Monroe is the designated point of attack. Others will follow his lead unless he's neutralized through performance demonstration. She paused, pen hovering over paper, then added, Note, service jacket requested by command. They're looking for reasons to cut me without cause. Must be flawless from here forward. Outside her window, she could see the obstacle course illuminated by floodlights. A few motivated candidates were running extra sessions, trying to shave seconds off their times. Jordan watched their technique, some efficient, others wasting energy on flashy moves that looked impressive, but slowed overall completion. Her knee still throbbed where she hit concrete. She pressed the joint carefully, testing for serious damage. Bruised but functional. She'd had worse. From her sea bag, she retrieved a small digital alarm clock and set it for 4:30, 30 minutes before mandatory formation. While her classmates slept, she would run the O course alone, memorizing each obstacle, finding the fastest line through each challenge. Rodriguez rolled over in his rack. You really think you can make it through this place? Jordan closed the notebook, tucked it beneath her pillow. I don't think anything. I just do the work. But as she lay in the darkness listening to the distant crash of Pacific waves, she touched the outline of Lexi's dog tag through her t-shirt and made a silent promise. They want me gone. They'll have to break me first. And I've been broken before. It didn't take. Jordan's alarm buzzed at 4:30, but she was already awake. She'd learned in Afghanistan that the body remembers danger even when the mind tries to rest. She dressed in the oversized uniform, double-knotted the 2 large boots, and slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness. The obstacle course stood empty under harsh floodlights. Jordan approached the first barrier, a 12-foot wall with a climbing rope. She tested her grip, calculated angles, then scaled it in 8 seconds. Not fast enough. She climbed down and tried again. 7 seconds. Again. 6.5. By 500 formation, she'd run the complete course 3 times, each iteration shaving precious seconds. Her hands were raw from rope burn, but her muscle memory had catalogued every handhold, every efficient movement pattern. Looking motivated, Blake, Monroe called out as candidates assembled on the grinder. Trying to make up for yesterday's faceplant. A few laughs rippled through the formation. Jordan said nothing, eyes forward, but she memorized faces, who laughed easily, who stayed silent, who looked uncomfortable with the mockery. Senior Chief Carter emerged from the instructor hut carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of a man about to ruin someone's day. Gentlemen, he announced, then caught himself with theatrical surprise. And lady, today we separate the wheat from the chaff. He gestured toward the course Jordan had just finished running in darkness. Standard Navy SEAL obstacle course. Passing time is 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Minimum acceptable time is 4 minutes flat. Anyone slower starts tomorrow's PT session with extra motivation. Jordan calculated quickly. Her best time in 3 attempts had been 4:15, 15 seconds to spare. Tight, but manageable. Oh, and Blake, Carter added with a smile that never touched his eyes. Since you're representing progress and equality, you'll run first. Set the standard for your classmates. The formation stirred. Running first meant no knowledge of course conditions, no chance to watch others' techniques, no opportunity to learn from their mistakes. It was a minor adjustment that carried major disadvantages. Jordan stepped forward. Understood, Chief. She approached the starting line, aware of 200 pairs of eyes weighing her every move. The course stretched ahead. Wall climb, rope traverse, balance beam, belly crawl under wire, tire run, final sprint to the finish bell. Time starts on the whistle, Carter said, raising the silver instrument to his lips. Jordan crouched into a runner's stance, everything else fading away. In this moment, she wasn't the woman who'd stumbled yesterday. She was the soldier who'd sprinted through Taliban fire to reach wounded comrades. The whistle shrieked. She exploded forward, hitting the 12-foot wall at full speed, using momentum to carry her up and over. The rope traverse came next, hand over hand across a 40-foot span, water hazard below. Her grip held despite the rope burn from her pre-dawn practice. Balance beam. She ran across the narrow wood plank without slowing, arms out for stability but core locked tight. Belly crawl. She flattened herself and warmed under the low wire grid, feeling barbs snag her oversized uniform. The tire run nearly broke her rhythm. Each heavy rubber cylinder had to be lifted and flipped end over end for 20 yards. Her shoulders screamed, but she maintained steady turnover, breathing controlled. Final sprint. 100 yards of loose sand that grabbed at her ill-fitting boots with every step. The finish bell gleamed ahead like salvation. Jordan slapped the bell hard enough to make it ring across the compound. She spun to check the digital timer mounted on a post, 4:12. 3 seconds inside the passing standard. Silence settled over the formation like morning fog. Then someone started clapping. Rodriguez, her roommate. The applause spread hesitantly through maybe a dozen candidates before dying out. Carter studied his stopwatch, his expression unreadable. 4:12. Acceptable. The word carried the weight of grudging admission. But as Jordan walked back to rejoin the formation, she heard whispers that cut deeper than yesterday's laughter. Course must be easier than they said. Standards are definitely getting lowered. Lucky run. Wait till Hell Week. The message was clear. Their success didn't prove competence. It proved the test itself was compromised. During the lunch break, Jordan sat alone again, mechanically eating a sandwich while reviewing her notebook. She'd added detailed observations about each candidate's reaction to her performance, mapping the social terrain like enemy positions. A shadow fell across her table. Staff Sergeant Williams, one of the senior instructors, stood with arms crossed. Unlike Carter's open hostility, Williams projected cold professionalism. "Blake," he said, voice pitched low. "Walk with me." They moved away from the crowded cafeteria toward a quiet corner of the parade ground. Williams lit a cigarette, took a long drag. "You ran a decent time this morning," he began. "Decent for someone with no background in special operations." Jordan waited. In her experience, compliments from instructors usually preceded body blows. "Here's the thing," Williams continued. "This program has a 90% attrition rate. 90% of the hardest, most motivated men in the Navy quit before graduation. You think you're special. You think your girl power inspiration story is going to carry you through surf torture and Hell Week." He flicked ash onto the concrete. "I've seen your file. Supply specialist, desk jockey. You've never been shot at, never carried a wounded teammate, never made a life-or-death decision under fire. Each lie landed like a physical blow, but Jordan kept her expression neutral. Her real service record remained classified, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic cover stories designed to protect operational security. The men you're training alongside. Williams gestured toward the cafeteria. They're warriors, born and bred. You're a publicity stunt that got out of hand. He dropped his cigarette, ground it under his heel. Do yourself a favor. Ring the bell tomorrow. Go back to counting bullets and filing paperwork. Leave the real work to people who understand what's at stake. Jordan met his gaze steadily. Is that an order, Staff Sergeant? Williams' jaw tightened. It's advice. From someone who's seen what happens when unqualified people try to keep up with SEALs. I appreciate the counseling, Jordan replied, her voice level as still water. But I'll let my performance speak for itself. Williams stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. Your funeral. As he walked away, Jordan touched the dog tag beneath her shirt. Lexi's metal was warm against her fingers, carrying the memory of shared foxholes and whispered promises. Not my funeral, she thought. Not this time. That evening, she found a note slipped under her door. Medical appointment, 800 tomorrow. Mandatory psychological evaluation. Jordan crumpled the paper, then smoothed it out again. They were escalating, probing for weaknesses, looking for any excuse to declare her unfit for duty. She opened her notebook to a fresh page and wrote, Day 2. Performance dismissed as luck. Psychological evaluation scheduled. Fishing expedition for mental health disqualification. They're running out of obvious angles. Below that, she added, Note, Williams knows less than he thinks he does. File security holding. Outside her window, candidates were already gathering for evening study sessions, comparing notes and building the bonds that would carry them through Hell Week. Jordan watched from the shadows, alone but not lonely. She'd been alone before, in places far more dangerous than a California training base. And she'd learned that sometimes the most powerful position was the one nobody expected you to occupy. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new attempts to break her resolve. But tonight, she would plan and prepare. And remember that wars weren't won by the loudest voices or the biggest muscles. They were won by the people who refused to quit, even when quitting was the only rational choice. Especially then. The Navy psychologist had kind eyes and a voice like warm honey. Dr. Sarah Chen spoke in the measured tones of someone trained to extract secrets from reluctant patients. So Jordan, she began, settling into her chair across from the standard issue desk. How are you adjusting to the training environment? Jordan sat ramrod straight, hands folded in her lap. The office smelled of industrial carpet and artificial air freshener. Nothing like the dust and cordite that had scented most of her real psychiatric sessions. No significant issues, ma'am. Dr. Chen smiled. Please, call me Sarah. This isn't a formal evaluation, just a routine check-in. We do this with all candidates who might be experiencing unique stressors. Unique stressors. Well, you're the only woman in the class. That must create some additional pressure. Jordan recognized the opening gambit, appear sympathetic while fishing for admissions of weakness. The pressure comes from the training, not from other people's expectations. But surely you've noticed some resistance. Some candidates might not be comfortable with integrated training. The standards are the same for everyone. Dr. Chen made a note, her pen scratching across the yellow legal pad. Tell me about your motivation for joining this program. What drives you to pursue such an unconventional path? The question hung in the air like bait. Jordan could provide the expected answer, breaking barriers, proving women's capabilities, inspiring the next generation. But she'd learned in Afghanistan that the truth, carefully rationed, was more disarming than elaborate lies. I'd want to be useful, she said simply. Useful how? In ways that matter. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. and you feel your current military occupation isn't meaningful. Jordan met her gaze. Supply specialists keep warriors fed and equipped. It's important work. But it's not the work I'm best suited for. What work would that be? The kind that saves lives in real time. Another note. Another probe. Have you ever been in a situation where lives were at stake? The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Jordan could deflect, maintain her cover, play the role of ambitious desk jockey seeking adventure. Or she could offer a single grain of truth, not enough to blow her carefully constructed identity, but sufficient to plant doubt in the doctor's assessment. Everyone in the military serves in life and death situations, ma'am. We just don't all pull triggers. The session continued for 45 minutes, a careful dance of question and deflection. Dr. Chen probed for signs of stress fractures, hidden trauma, psychological instability that might manifest under extreme conditions. Jordan provided textbook responses, confident but not cocky, motivated but realistic, aware of challenges but committed to success. As the appointment concluded, Dr. Chen offered her professional smile. I'll file my report this afternoon. Standard recommendation for continued training. But as Jordan reached the door, the psychologist added casually, one more thing. Have you experienced any intrusive thoughts lately? Flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance? Jordan's hand paused on the doorknob. The question was too specific, too targeted. Someone had been asking about PTSD indicators. No, ma'am, she replied, sleeping fine. Outside the admin building, Jordan found Rodriguez waiting by the flagpole. His expression was grim. We got a problem, he said without preamble. Monroe's been spreading word that you're getting special treatment. Says the psych evil was actually a private counseling session to help you cope with the stress. Jordan processed this information. The narrative was shifting, from incompetent diversity hired to fragile female requiring therapeutic support. Either way, the message was the same. She didn't belong. What else? Heard some guys talking about making training more realistic for you. Whatever that means. That afternoon's evolution was surf torture, lying in the freezing Pacific while waves crashed over prone bodies. Instructors timing how long candidates could maintain position before hypothermia forced them to quit. It was psychological warfare disguised as physical conditioning. Jordan took her place in the line of candidates stretched along the water's edge. The October ocean felt like liquid ice, each weighed a fresh assault on already numbed flesh. She locked her muscles, controlled her breathing, and settled into the meditative state that had carried her through 2-hour sniper hides in Afghan winters. Beside her, Monroe lay with theatrical stoicism, making sure everyone noticed his superior cold tolerance. This is where we separate the tourists from the operators, he announced to no one in particular. 10 minutes in, candidates began shivering violently. 20 minutes, the first man rolled out of formation and staggered toward the warming fire. By 30 minutes, half the class was gone. Jordan remained motionless, counting heartbeats instead of seconds. The cold had progressed beyond pain into a strange, distant numbness. She could feel her core temperature dropping, but her mind stayed sharp, focused on the simple task of not moving. At 45 minutes, only 8 candidates remained prone in the surf. Monroe had been gone for 10 minutes, his bravado lasting exactly as long as his comfort level. Blake. Senior Chief Carter's voice cut through the wave noise. Stand up. Jordan didn't move. The command wasn't standard. Candidates were supposed to hold position until formally dismissed from the evolution. I said stand up, candidate. Still Jordan held her position. Around her, the remaining 7 candidates exchanged glances. This wasn't normal protocol. Carter stalked into the surf, his boots sending spray across the prone figures. Are you deaf, Blake? On your feet. Jordan slowly rose, water streaming from her soaked uniform. Her legs trembled, not from fear, but from 45 minutes of muscle rigidity in near-freezing water. Looks like our diversity hire has hearing problems, Carter announced to the watching instructors. Maybe the stress is getting to her. Maybe she needs another counseling session. The humiliation was calculated, designed to break her composure in front of the surviving candidates. Jordan stood at attention, saying nothing, giving them no reaction to feed on. Since you seem confused about basic commands, Carter continued, you can run the obstacle course. Full gear. Right now. Jordan's uniform was soaked, her boots sloshed with seawater, and her core temperature was dangerously low. Running the O course in these conditions risked serious injury. But refusing would provide the excuse they needed to declare her insubordinate. Understood, Chief. She jogged toward the course, her waterlogged boots making wet slapping sounds against the concrete. Behind her, she heard Monroe's voice. $20 says she doesn't make it past the rope climb. The obstacle course became a nightmare of slipping grips and clumsy movements. The rope traverse nearly ended her. Her numbed fingers couldn't maintain purchase on the wet Manila line. She fell twice into the water hazard below, each splash drawing laughter from the watching candidates. But she got up, climbed out, continued. The balance beam tested her equilibrium with legs that felt like rubber. The belly crawl ripped her already torn uniform on the wire obstacles. The tire run became an exercise in pure will, her shoulders screaming as she flipped the heavy rubber cylinders. When she finally rang the finish bell, the timer showed 7:43, nearly double her morning performance. Carter consulted his clipboard with theatrical interest. 7 minutes, 43 seconds. That's what we call a failure, Blake. Jordan stood dripping and shivering, but her voice was steady. Request to attempt the course again, Chief. Carter's eyebrows rose. Again? In your condition? Conditions were suboptimal. Request permission to demonstrate standard performance. The request was audacious. No candidate had ever asked to immediately rerun a failed evolution. But it was also technically within regulations. Candidates were allowed to request retesting if they believed external factors had compromised their performance. Carter stared at her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. Outstanding initiative, Blake. Of course you can run it again. He turned to the watching instructors. And since she's so motivated, let's make sure she gets the full training value. Set up the fire hose. Jordan's heart sank. The fire hose was psychological torture disguised as safety equipment. A high-pressure stream of water used to simulate combat stress during training evolutions. Candidates were expected to complete tasks while being blasted by the hose, testing their ability to function under disorienting conditions. As she approached the starting line again, 2 instructors aimed the industrial fire hose at the obstacle course. When Carter blew his whistle, twin streams of high-pressure water turned the already difficult course into a battle zone. Jordan fought through the artificial hurricane, each obstacle becoming an individual war against physics and determination. The wall climb became a desperate scramble up slick wood while water hammered her spine. The rope traverse turned into an endurance test as the hose tried to blast her loose. But she held on, and she kept moving. When she rang the bell the second time, her legs finally gave out. She collapsed beside the timer post, chest heaving, uniform shredded, hands bleeding from rope burns and wire cuts. The digital display read 49. 21 seconds under the passing standard. Dead silence settled over the training area. Even the instructors seemed stunned by what they'd witnessed. A candidate completing the obstacle course under conditions that would challenge experienced SEALs. Senior Chief Carter walked slowly to where Jordan lay gasping in the sand. For the first time since her arrival, his expression showed something other than contempt. "Get to medical," he said quietly. "Have them check you for hypothermia." As Jordan struggled to her feet, Rodriguez appeared at her elbow, offering silent support. Together, they walked toward the medical building while whispers followed in their wake. "Did you see that? She ran it twice. Under the hose. Who the hell is she?" In her room that night, Jordan opened her notebook with hands that still trembled from cold and exhaustion. She wrote, Day 3. Direct confrontation. They played their strongest card. Humiliation plus impossible conditions. Card failed. Below that, note, revealed more capability than intended. Operational security compromised. Expect escalation. She closed the notebook and lay back on her narrow rack. Through the thin walls, she could hear muted conversations from other rooms. Candidates processing what they'd witnessed, recalibrating their assumptions about the woman they dismissed as a quota filler. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts to break her. But tonight, for the first time since arriving at Coronado, Jordan Blake allowed herself a small smile. They'd thrown everything they had at her, and she was still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. Still proving that some doors, once opened, couldn't be slammed shut again. Jordan woke at 3:30 to find a manila envelope slipped under her door. No postmark, no official letterhead, just her name written in block letters across the front. Inside, a single photograph, the moments after her collapse beside the obstacle course timer, looking broken and defeated despite her passing score. Below the image, someone had written, "This is what failure looks like. Save everyone the embarrassment." She studied the photo for a long moment, then tore it into precise squares and flushed the pieces down the communal head. Psychological warfare was a two-way street, and whoever had delivered this message had just revealed their own weakness. They were rattled enough to operate outside official channels. In her notebook, she wrote, "Anonymous intimidation attempt. Photograph suggests surveillance during yesterday's evolution. Someone documented expected failure, had to improvise when outcome didn't match prediction." Below that, opportunity. Unofficial harassment indicates official channels insufficient. They're making mistakes. At morning formation, Jordan noticed a shift in the dynamics. Conversations died when she approached, but the silence felt different. Less dismissive, more wary. Rodriguez fell into step beside her as they jogged toward the chow hall. "Word's getting around," he said quietly. "About yesterday. Some guys are saying you've got to be prior service to pull that kind of performance." Jordan kept her eyes forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your supply specialist cover story's wearing thin. People are asking questions." She'd expected this moment. Her demonstration under the fire hose had crossed the line from impressive to impossible for someone with her supposed background. The performance gap was too large to ignore. Questions like what? Like why a desk jockey moves like someone who's been shot at before. Like why you know exactly how to regulate breathing under stress. Like why your pain tolerance is off the charts. They reached the cafeteria, but Rodriguez caught her arm before they entered. "Look, I don't know what your real story is, and I don't need to. But if you've got operational experience, now might be the time to let people know. Because they're not just trying to wash you out anymore. They're actively trying to hurt you." Jordan considered the advice. Revealing her true background would end the harassment, earn instant respect, and probably guarantee graduation. It would also compromise 8 years of carefully maintained operational security and potentially endanger ongoing classified programs. "I am what my file says I am," she replied. "Everything else is just training paying off." Rodriguez nodded, accepting the non-answer. But as they entered the chow hall, Jordan caught fragments of conversation from nearby tables. Heard she was asking about advanced marksmanship courses. Moves like infantry, not supply. Some said she had a Silver Star citation. The rumor mill was working in her favor, creating speculation that was both more and less than the truth. She neither confirmed nor denied the whispers, letting uncertainty work for her instead of against her. After breakfast, Jordan reported to the training office for her next assignment. Staff Sergeant Williams was waiting with a clipboard and an expression that promised misery. "Blake," he said without preamble, "you're being transferred to advanced weapons training. Congratulations." The word congratulations dripped with sarcasm. Advanced weapons training was typically reserved for candidates who'd proven themselves over several weeks. Moving her there after 3 days was either recognition of unusual competence or a setup for public failure. "When do I report, Staff Sergeant?" "Right now, Range 7. You'll be evaluated on unfamiliar weapon systems under time pressure. Hope your supply background included some trigger time." Jordan walked across the base to Range 7, a covered firing line that smelled of gun oil and burnt powder. A dozen weapon stations were set up with different firearms. Some she recognized, others she'd never seen before. At each station, a timer counted down from 60 seconds. The challenge was obvious. Demonstrate competency on multiple weapon systems with minimal preparation time. For most candidates, it would be an exercise in controlled failure, designed to humble anyone who'd gotten cocky about their shooting skills. For Jordan Blake, former sniper instructor and graduate of every advanced marksmanship school the Army offered, it was Christmas morning. The range officer, a grizzled gunnery sergeant named Torres, handed her safety equipment and a scorecard. 12 stations, 60 seconds each. Minimum standard is 6 hits out of 10 at each position. Any questions? No questions, Gunny. Then step to the line and wait for the buzzer. Jordan moved to the first station, a standard M4 carbine with iron sights. When the buzzer sounded, she fell into the familiar rhythm. Check clear, load magazine, sight picture, controlled pairs. 10 rounds, 10 hits in the X-ring. Time remaining, 23 seconds. Station 2, Sig Sauer pistol with tactical light. Same drill, same result. Station 3, bolt-action sniper rifle with high-power scope. She adjusted for wind and elevation instinctively, each shot breaking clean. By Station 6, she'd drawn a crowd. Instructors appeared as if summoned by telepathy, gathering behind the firing line to watch the supply specialist put on a shooting clinic. The whispers were audible now. Who the hell trained her? Those are operator-level groups. Supply my ass. Jordan blocked out the commentary, focusing only on the weapons in her hands and the targets downrange. Station 9, shotgun with buckshot. Station 10, submachine gun with burst fire. Station 11, grenade launcher with training rounds. Each system was different, each requiring unique techniques and muscle memory. But the fundamentals remained constant: sight alignment, trigger control, breathing, follow-through. Skills she drilled until they became unconscious reflex. The final station featured a weapon she'd never seen before, a prototype rifle with electronic optics and an unfamiliar operating system. No manual, no instruction, just 60 seconds to figure out how it worked and put rounds on target. Jordan examined the rifle quickly, identifying the safety, magazine release, and charging handle through pure mechanical intuition. The electronic sight was more complex, but the basic principles were universal. She loaded, aimed, and fired. 10 shots, 10 hits. When the final buzzer sounded, Range 7 had gone completely silent. Jordan cleared the last weapon, set it down, and turned to face Gunnery Sergeant Torres. His expression was unreadable. "Score," he called to the range assistant. "Perfect across all stations," came the reply. 100% accuracy, average time per station 37 seconds. Torres studied his clipboard, then looked up at Jordan. "Candidate Blake, what's your military occupational specialty?" "Supply specialist, Gunny, 92 Yankee." "Aha. And where did a supply specialist learn to shoot like that?" Jordan met his gaze steadily. "Army Marksmanship Unit, competitive shooting program. Voluntary additional training during off-duty hours." It was plausible enough to avoid immediate contradiction, close enough to the truth to pass casual scrutiny. Torres nodded slowly, but skepticism remained in his eyes. "Outstanding performance," he said formally. "Report to your instructor for next assignment." As Jordan walked off the range, she heard fragments of heated discussion from the clustered instructors. AMU doesn't produce that kind of tactical shooting. Simone's not telling the whole story. Need to pull the complete service jacket. Back in her room that evening, Jordan found Rodriguez waiting with a serious expression. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Somewhere private." They walked to a secluded area behind the boat storage building, away from curious ears and recording devices. Rodriguez lit a cigarette, took a long drag. "I've been asking around," he began. Carefully. "About you." Jordan said nothing, waiting. "Here's what I found out. Your official file is thinner than paper. Standard supply specialist training, routine assignments, nothing that would explain what I saw on that range today. But there are gaps. Deployment records that don't quite line up. Training schools that aren't listed but show up in cross-references." He flicked ash into the darkness. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to scrub your background. Professional job. The kind of editing that requires high-level clearance." Jordan considered her options. Rodriguez was smart, observant, and persistent. He'd already uncovered more than most people would find. Continuing to lie might drive him to dig deeper, potentially exposing operational security. But partial truth might buy his silence and support. "What do you want to know?" she asked finally. "I want to know if the woman who's been watching my back is someone I can trust. I want to know if you're here for the right reasons. And I want to know if they're going to try to hurt you badly enough that it affects the rest of us." Jordan studied his face in the dim light. Rodriguez had grown up hard, learned to read people for survival. He wouldn't accept easy lies or comfortable half-truths. "My real specialty is putting holes in things at long distance," she said quietly. "Everything else is classification levels you don't have clearance for." Rodriguez nodded as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "And you're here because I watched someone die when training failed to prepare people for the real thing. I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen again." "Fair enough." He dropped his cigarette, ground it under his heel. "Here's what you need to know. They're planning something for tomorrow. Monroe's been talking to some of the senior candidates, getting them worked up about special treatment and lowered standards. Whatever's coming, it's not going to be official." Jordan felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. What kind of something? The kind that looks like an accident but isn't. The kind that gives them justification to med-board you out with injuries too severe to continue training. She absorbed this information, calculating responses and countermeasures. If they were moving to physical intimidation, it meant psychological warfare had failed. It also meant they were getting desperate, taking risks that could expose them if handled correctly. "Rodriguez," she said quietly, "I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to document everything. Times, locations, participants. And if something happens to me tomorrow, I need you to make sure that information gets to someone who can use it." He stared at her for a long moment. "You're not thinking of quitting, are you?" Jordan touched the dog tag beneath her shirt, feeling the metal warm against her skin. "I'm thinking of winning." "What's the difference?" "Winning means they lose more than I do." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "I can work with that." As they walked back toward the barracks, Jordan felt the familiar sensation of pieces moving on a chessboard. Tomorrow would bring the real test, not of her physical capabilities, but of her ability to turn their own tactics against them. She'd spent 8 years learning how to fight enemies who didn't follow the rules. Now it was time to apply those lessons to enemies who wore the same uniform. The war was about to begin in earnest. Jordan woke before her alarm to the sound of hushed voices in the corridor. Through her thin door, she caught fragments of urgent conversation. "Make sure there's no recording devices. Has to look accidental. Tired of watching standards get trashed." Rodriguez's warning had been accurate. They were coming for her today. She dressed in the pre-dawn darkness, lacing her boots with mechanical precision. From her sea bag, she retrieved a small digital recorder, military surplus, voice-activated, with 8 hours of memory. She taped it inside her uniform blouse, against her ribs where it wouldn't be noticed during casual inspection. In her notebook, she wrote, Day 4, Escalation to physical intimidation imminent. Evidence collection protocol activated. At morning formation, the atmosphere felt charged with unspoken tension. Monroe stood with a group of senior candidates, their expressions ranging from eager to uncomfortable. A few looked genuinely troubled, as if they'd been dragged into something they weren't sure they supported. Senior Chief Carter appeared with his usual clipboard and predatory smile. Gentlemen, he announced, today we practice team cohesion exercises. These drills are designed to build trust and cooperation under stress. Jordan's internal alarms went off. Team cohesion exercises were typically conducted later in training, after candidates had proven basic competency. Introducing them now, with tensions running high, was either poor judgment or deliberate provocation. Blake, Carter continued, you'll be partnered with Monroe and his squad for today's evolutions. Time to see if you can keep up with real operators. The assignment was obvious manipulation, pairing her with the candidate most hostile to her presence. But refusing would provide the excuse they needed to declare her non-cooperative. Understood, Chief. The exercise area was set up behind the main training complex, away from casual observation. Ropes, wooden barriers, and water obstacles created an elaborate maze that required teamwork to navigate successfully. Standard stuff, except for the absence of safety monitors and medical personnel. Carter gathered the candidates around a sand table, showing the course layout. Rules are simple, he explained. Teams navigate the obstacles together. No one advances until everyone advances. Time limit is 30 minutes. Failure means the whole squad starts tomorrow with extra motivation. He gestured toward Monroe's group. Squad leaders are responsible for keeping their teams together and ensuring mission success. Use whatever methods you deem necessary. The phrase whatever methods you deem necessary was loaded with implication. In normal circumstances, it meant tactical flexibility. In this context, it was permission to escalate. Monroe stepped forward, assuming squad leader position with theatrical authority. All right, people, he announced. We're going to move fast and move together. Anyone who can't keep up drags us all down. His eyes found Jordan's. The message was clear. They approached the first obstacle, a 15-foot wall that required team lifting to get everyone over. Standard procedure was for the strongest candidates to boost others up, then be pulled up by those already on top. Blake goes first, Monroe ordered. Let's see what she's made of. Jordan positioned herself at the base of the wall, while two candidates interlaced their fingers to create a stirrup. She stepped into their hands, reached for the top of the wall, and felt the boost disappear. The candidates lowered their hands suddenly, dropping her hard onto the sand. She landed off balance, rolling to absorb the impact, but pain shot through her left ankle. Oops, Monroe said loudly. Guess we need to work on our timing. The digital recorder against her ribs captured every word. They tried again. This time, Jordan made it halfway up the wall before the candidate supposedly securing the rope let it slip. She fell 8 feet, landing on her back hard enough to drive the air from her lungs. Communication breakdown, Monroe announced to the watching squad. We'll get it right eventually. The pattern continued through each obstacle. Equipment failures that weren't quite failures. Timing errors that weren't quite errors. Each incident plausibly deniable. Each one designed to inflict cumulative damage. At the rope traverse, Jordan made it halfway across before someone accidentally shook the anchor point, sending her plunging into the muddy water below. During the belly crawl, a candidate's boot slipped, driving her face into the dirt and reopening cuts from previous training. By the time they reached the final obstacle, a cargo net climb that required coordinated movement, Jordan was bleeding from multiple scrapes, favoring her twisted ankle, and fighting to control her breathing. But she was also documenting everything: voices, methods, timing. "Last one," Monroe announced as they gathered at the base of the 30-foot net. "We all go up together, nice and smooth." Jordan started climbing, testing each handhold carefully. The net swayed under the weight of multiple climbers, but she maintained steady progress upward. Halfway to the top, she heard Monroe's voice below. "Blake's looking tired. Maybe someone should give her some help." The candidate climbing beside her, a former college wrestler named Thompson, suddenly grabbed her wrist. "Don't want you falling again," he said with false concern. But instead of steadying her, his grip tightened into a restraint. Jordan tried to pull free, but Thompson's superior size and leverage gave him control. "Let go," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Just trying to help," Thompson replied, his grip tightening further. "Wouldn't want you to slip." Jordan looked down at Monroe, who was watching with obvious satisfaction. Around the base of the net, other candidates shifted uncomfortably, some clearly in on the plan, others beginning to realize they were witnessing something that crossed lines. "Thompson," Jordan said, her voice carrying the flat authority she'd used with subordinates in Afghanistan. "Release my wrist. Now." Something in her tone made Thompson hesitate. For a moment, the mask slipped, and he saw not a struggling female candidate, but a combat veteran who'd given orders under fire. "I said let go." Thompson's grip loosened slightly. Jordan didn't waste the opportunity. Using techniques learned in Army combatants training, she pivoted her wrist against his thumb, the weakest part of any grip, and broke free. But the sudden movement sent her swinging sideways on the unstable net. Her injured ankle couldn't support the landing, and she fell the remaining 20 feet to the sand below. The impact drove the air from her lungs and sent lightning bolts of pain through her ribs. But as she lay gasping in the dirt, Jordan heard the sound she'd been waiting for. Genuine concern from some of the watching candidates. "Jesus, is she okay? That looked bad. Should we call medical?" Rodriguez pushed through the crowd, dropping to his knees beside her. "Blake, talk to me. You conscious?" Jordan nodded, testing her limbs for serious injury. Bruised ribs, aggravated ankle, various cuts and scrapes, but nothing broken. She had worse during routine training exercises. "I'm fine," she said, accepting Rodriguez's hand to sit up. "Like hell you are," Rodriguez shot back, his voice carrying across the training area. "Someone needs to explain why safety protocols weren't followed." Monroe climbed down from the net, his expression shifting from satisfaction to concern as he realized the situation was spiraling beyond his control. "It was an accident," he said quickly. "Training injuries happen." "Do they?" Rodriguez stood, facing Monroe directly. "Because from where I was standing, it looked like Thompson grabbed her wrist right before she fell." "You're seeing things wrong," Monroe replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Jordan struggled to her feet, waving off offers of assistance. Every eye in the training area was focused on her now, some hostile, some sympathetic, most simply calculating what they'd witnessed. "Medical check," she announced clearly. "I want a corpsman to document any injuries." The request was tactically brilliant. If she was seriously hurt, medical documentation would create an official record of the accident. If she wasn't seriously hurt, it would demonstrate that their harassment had failed to achieve its objective. Senior Chief Carter appeared as if summoned by crisis instinct. He surveyed the scene, Jordan standing but obviously battered, candidates grouped into uncomfortable clusters, tension thick enough to cut. "What happened here?" he demanded. Monroe stepped forward. "Training accident, Chief." Blake lost her grip on the net and fell. "That's not what happened," Rodriguez interjected. Thompson grabbed her wrist and... "I was helping her," Thompson interrupted. She was slipping. Carter's eyes moved between the participants, reading the subtext. This situation had escalated beyond simple hazing into something that could generate official scrutiny. "Medical evaluation," he ordered. "Full documentation. Everyone else back to barracks for equipment maintenance. As the crowd dispersed, Jordan caught Rodriguez's arm. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For making them go on record with their lies." The medical examination revealed exactly what Jordan had expected. Superficial injuries consistent with training accidents, nothing serious enough to justify removal from the program. But the documentation process created something more valuable than medical records. It created witnesses. The corpsman, a Korean Navy medical technician named Petty Officer Martinez, was thorough and professional. He photographed each injury, measured impact sites, and recorded detailed descriptions of how each wound supposedly occurred. "These abrasions on your wrists," he noted during the examination, "they're consistent with grip pressure, not rope burns." Jordan met his eyes. "I wouldn't know, Doc. I just fell." Martinez nodded, understanding the message. His report would contain medical facts that spoke louder than any testimony. That evening, Jordan sat in her room updating her notebook when Rodriguez knocked on her door. He entered carrying a tablet computer and wearing an expression of grim satisfaction. "You need to see this," he said, setting the device on her desk. The screen showed an internal Navy message board, the kind career sailors used to share information and rumors. Someone had posted a detailed account of the morning's training accident, complete with timestamps and participant names. "Who wrote this?" Jordan asked. "Someone who was there. Someone who didn't like what they saw." The post was clinically factual, describing events without editorial comment. But the implications were clear. What had been presented as an accident contained elements that suggested deliberate action. More importantly, the post had generated responses. Other candidates, some who'd witnessed the events and others who'd heard second-hand accounts, were weighing in with their own observations, saw the same thing. Thompson definitely grabbed her wrist. Been noticing a pattern of accidents involving Blake. Maybe it's time someone asked official questions. This is getting out of hand. Rodriguez scrolled through the growing thread. Words spreading. Not everyone's comfortable with what's been happening. Jordan absorbed this information. The campaign to isolate and intimidate her was fracturing along moral lines. Some candidates supported it, others opposed it, and a growing number were simply uncomfortable with the escalation. "What happens next?" Rodriguez asked. Jordan closed the tablet, thinking. In Afghanistan, she'd learned that the most effective operations were those that forced enemies to expose themselves through overreaction. Today's incident had accomplished exactly that. Monroe and his supporters had revealed both their methods and their participants in ways that could be documented and verified. "Now we let them make the next mistake," she said, "and we make sure that mistake is their last one. You think they'll back down?" Jordan touched the small recorder still taped inside her uniform. 8 hours of digital evidence, every word preserved in crystal clarity. "I think they're about to discover that some wars aren't won by the biggest army," she replied. "They're won by the side that documents everything." Jordan arrived at the next morning's formation carrying a manila folder that contained 8 hours of digital transcripts, medical documentation, and a detailed timeline of harassment incidents. She'd spent the night converting audio recordings into written evidence, cross-referencing statements with training schedules, and building a case that would withstand official scrutiny. But she wouldn't need to present it to investigators. She was going to present it to the people who mattered most, her fellow candidates. Senior Chief Carter took his position at the podium, clipboard in hand, ready to begin another day of psychological warfare disguised as military training. Before he could speak, Jordan stepped forward. "Chief, I request permission to address the formation." Carter's eyebrows rose. Candidates didn't make requests during morning formation. They received orders and acknowledged them. The breach of protocol was deliberate and calculated. "Negative," Carter replied. "Fall back into formation." "Chief," Jordan continued, her voice carrying across the silent grinder, "I believe the candidates deserve to know what's been happening during supposedly routine training exercises." The formation stirred. Conversations died. 200 pairs of eyes focused on the confrontation developing between the woman who'd survived every attempt to break her and the instructor who'd orchestrated many of those attempts. "Blake," Carter's voice carried warning, "you are out of line. Return to your position immediately." Instead, Jordan opened her folder and withdrew a single sheet of paper. "Yesterday's training accident has been fully documented," she announced, her voice pitched to carry to the back ranks. Medical examination revealed grip pressure injuries consistent with manual restraint, not rope burns from falling. Monroe stepped forward from his position in the formation. "You're making serious accusations," he said loudly. "Based on what? Your paranoid imagination?" Jordan turned to face him directly. "Based on digital recordings of every word spoken during yesterday's exercise." The statement landed like a grenade in the middle of the formation. Monroe's face went pale. Thompson, standing beside him, looked like he might vomit. "That's illegal," Monroe protested. "Recording without consent is completely legal during official military training exercises," Jordan finished. "Especially when those exercises involve potential safety violations." She held up a small digital device, the recorder she'd carried against her ribs. 8 hours of audio documentation. Every command, every response, every accident that wasn't quite accidental. Senior Chief Carter stepped forward, his expression shifting from annoyance to genuine concern. This situation was spiraling beyond anything he could control through normal disciplinary channels. "Candidate Blake," he said formally, "you'll report to the commanding officer immediately. Bring your alleged evidence." "Understood, Chief. But first, I think the formation should hear exactly what kind of training has been taking place." Jordan pressed play on the digital recorder. Monroe's voice filled the morning air, crystal clear and impossible to deny. "Blake's looking tired. Maybe someone should give her some help." Thompson's response followed. "Don't want you falling again." Then her own voice, calm but commanding. "Let go, Thompson. Release my wrist. Now." The recording continued, capturing not just the words but the tone, the calculation, the deliberate nature of what had been presented as accidental. The formation was dead silent. Even the seagulls seemed to have stopped their morning cries. Jordan clicked off the recorder. "This represents just one incident. The complete documentation includes 12 separate harassment events over 4 days, involving 7 participants, all designed to force my voluntary withdrawal from training." Monroe found his voice. "This is bullshit," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "You're twisting everything, making it sound." "Like what it actually was?" Jordan interrupted. "Like a coordinated campaign to circumvent official training standards through unofficial intimidation." She turned to address the broader formation. "Here's what I want everyone to understand. This isn't about me. It's about what happens when military training becomes secondary to personal prejudice. It's about what happens when the standards we're supposed to uphold get compromised by agendas that have nothing to do with mission readiness." Rodriguez stepped forward from his position in the formation. "I was there yesterday," he announced. "I saw what happened. Blake's telling the truth." Another voice joined his. "Same here. That wasn't an accident." Then another. "Been watching this build for days. About time someone called it out." The solidarity wasn't universal. Some candidates remained silent, either supportive of Monroe's actions or unwilling to take sides. But the balance was shifting, the narrative changing from isolated troublemaker to whistleblower exposing systemic problems. Senior Chief Carter realized he was losing control of the situation. "Formation dismissed," he barked. "All candidates return to barracks immediately." "Wait," Jordan said, her voice cutting through the beginning shuffle of movement. "There's one more thing the formation needs to hear." She reached into her folder and withdrew a second document. A complete military service record, declassified just that morning through emergency channels she activated during the night. "Staff Sergeant Jordan Blake," she read aloud. "United States Army, Military Occupational Specialty 11B Infantry. Secondary MOS 18D Special Forces Medical Sergeant. Tertiary Qualification B4 Sniper. The formation went deadly still. Combat deployments. Afghanistan 2018 to 2019. Afghanistan 2020 to 2021. Decorations include Silver Star for actions under fire, Bronze Star with the device for valor, Purple Heart, Combat Action Badge. Monroe's face had gone from pale to gray. Thompson looked like he was going to be sick. Jordan continued reading. Current assignment. Special Operations Forces Advanced Individual Training, Cross-Service Evaluation for Naval Special Warfare Integration Pilot Program. She closed the folder and looked directly at Senior Chief Carter. I'm not here as a diversity experiment, Chief. I'm here as a qualified special operations professional, conducting an evaluation of your training methods and standards. The silence that followed was absolute. 200 candidates and a dozen instructors processing the revelation that the woman they dismissed as an unqualified quota filler was actually a combat veteran with more operational experience than most of them combined. Carter found his voice first. Why didn't you identify yourself properly from the beginning? Because the evaluation required observing normal training procedures, Jordan replied. If you'd known who I was, you would have treated me differently. I needed to see how you actually treat candidates who don't fit your preconceptions. She gestured toward Monroe and his supporters. What I discovered is that some members of this command are willing to compromise training standards, violate safety protocols, and engage in systematic harassment to eliminate candidates they personally disapprove of. Monroe made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. This is all fabricated, he said. She's making up stories to cover her own failures. Jordan smiled for the first time since arriving at Coronado. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Petty Officer Monroe, she said, using his rank for the first time, you're absolutely right that this evaluation has documented failures. Just not the ones you think. She turned to address the formation one final time. Naval Special Warfare Command will receive my complete report within 24 hours. That report will include recommendations for policy changes, personnel actions, and training modifications based on what I've observed here. The implications hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Careers would be affected. Policies would change. The old ways of doing business were about to meet the new reality of accountability. As candidates began to disperse toward the barracks, Jordan noticed the change in how they looked at her. No longer dismissive or patronizing, but respectful. The recognition that competence commanded regardless of gender or background. Rodriguez approached as the crowd thinned. So what happens now? Jordan packed her evidence folder, checking that all documentation was secure. Now the real work begins. This was just about proving I belonged here. The next phase is about making sure the door stays open for everyone who comes after. She looked across the grinder toward the obstacle course where she'd fallen, bled, and ultimately triumphed. Change isn't a destination, she said quietly. It's a process, and processes require maintenance. Senior Chief Carter appeared at her elbow, his expression unreadable. Blake, he said formally, the commanding officer wants to see you. Immediately. Jordan nodded. Understood, Chief. As she walked toward the headquarters building, she could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes watching her departure. Some hostile, some supportive, most simply curious about what would happen next. What would happen next, Jordan knew, was that the system would finally have to confront the gap between its stated values and its actual practices. And for the first time since arriving at Coronado, she was confident about which side would win that confrontation. The door she'd forced open wasn't closing again. Not on her watch. 6 months later, Jordan Blake stood on the same grinder where she'd once been humiliated for the simple act of stumbling. But this time, she wore the gold trident pin of a Navy SEAL, and she was addressing a new class of candidates, including 12 women. The investigation that followed her formal complaint had been swift and thorough. Monroe received a career-ending non-judicial punishment and administrative separation. Thompson and 2 other participants received formal reprimands and were removed from training. Senior Chief Carter was reassigned to non-training duties pending retirement. More importantly, the investigation had exposed systematic flaws in how harassment complaints were processed, how candidates were evaluated, and how unofficial power structures operated within the training command. Policy changes followed, creating formal channels for reporting bias and establishing independent oversight of training evolutions. "The standards haven't changed," Jordan told the new class, her voice carrying easily across the concrete expanse. "They've been clarified. What you'll discover here is that competence has no gender, no color, no background. It's simply the ability to do the job when lives depend on it." She gestured toward the obstacle course. "Some of you will fail these tests. That's expected. This program has always had a high attrition rate. But you'll fail because the job exceeded your capabilities, not because someone decided you didn't belong before you had a chance to prove yourself." In the formation, she could see faces that reflected the new reality. Men and women, different races and backgrounds, all united by the common goal of earning the right to serve in special operations. The change wasn't complete. Cultural shifts took time. But it was undeniable. After the formation, Jordan walked to a quiet corner of the base where a small memorial honored SEALs killed in action. She knelt beside a granite marker and placed a folded American flag at its base. "Mission complete, Lexi," she whispered to the stone. "The door's open. The doctrine's fixed. And the next woman who has to take a shot with hostages in the field will have been trained by people who understand that hesitation kills everyone." Rodriguez appeared beside her, now wearing surgeon's stripes and serving as an instructor himself. "Penny for your thoughts." Jordan stood, brushing sand from her knees. "Just keeping a promise." "To who?" "To everyone who comes after." They walked together toward the headquarters building, where Jordan maintained an office as the first female SEAL assigned to training development. Her official title was Senior Instructor, Advanced Tactical Applications, but everyone knew her real job, making sure the changes stuck. "Any regrets?" Rodriguez asked as they reached the parking lot. Jordan considered the question seriously. The path she'd chosen had cost her privacy, anonymity, and the comfortable obscurity of her previous assignment. She'd become a symbol whether she wanted to or not, a focal point for debates about military integration and social change. But she'd also accomplished something that would outlast any individual career. She'd proven that excellence transcended prejudice, that standards applied equally were stronger than standards applied selectively. "Just one," she said finally. "What's that?" Jordan looked back at the grinder, where new candidates were already beginning their evening training. In the distance, she could see women running alongside men, working as equals rather than curiosities. "I regret that it took so long for someone to try." She climbed into her truck and drove off the base, leaving behind the sound of whistles and shouted commands, the eternal rhythm of military training. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new candidates to evaluate, new barriers to tear down. But tonight, for the first time in 8 years, Jordan Blake allowed herself to feel something she'd almost forgotten: peace. The war was won. The door was open, and the next generation of warriors would walk through it without having to fight the same battles she'd fought. Some victories, she reflected, were worth every scar they cost. In her rearview mirror, the lights of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado grew smaller, but never disappeared entirely. They would always be there, a reminder of the moment when one woman's refusal to quit had changed the trajectory of an entire institution. The road ahead stretched empty and full of possibility, lit by stars that had witnessed the beginning of her journey and would illuminate whatever came next. Jordan Blake drove toward that future with steady hands and a quiet heart, knowing that the hardest battles were behind her and the most important victories lay ahead. The beast they tried to break had instead rebuilt the system that created it. And that, she knew, was how real change happened, not through grand gestures or inspiring speeches, but through the simple act of refusing to accept that things had to remain the way they'd always been. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. Jordan had made sure of that. The rest was up to those who would follow in her wake, carrying forward the legacy of a sniper instructor who'd learned that the most important targets weren't always the ones you could see through a scope. Sometimes they were the assumptions, the prejudices, and the barriers that stood between competence and opportunity. And sometimes, the best way to hit those targets was simply to prove they were made of glass. The end. Thank you for staying with us until the end of Jordan's incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. We bring you powerful, true-to-life stories of courage, perseverance, and triumph that will inspire and move you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Share your thoughts about Jordan's story and let us know what part resonated most with you. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us continue sharing these important stories that need to be told. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and remember to share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep believing that one person's courage can change everything.